Hello, Arena. Hey, glad to be with you again. Glad to help you. As I always say, any way I need to, and enjoy doing this for you. So I just to make it one instead of two, I just brought, as you can see, the unit test question and then the final exam questions into one, seven total. So this won't take us very long. And actually, looking at the questions, a lot of it is vocabulary in nature. So once we clean that up, you'll see just where you are. And then, today is the 30th, it's your end date, but you can work all through today. So if you do want to another shot at it, it'll have to be today, tonight. That way, tomorrow, on Thursday, July 1st, I can close it out. So let's get started. Here we go. Let me slide this over and bring this in. We can focus on one at a time here. And get my pen ready here just in case. Alright, so this first question from the unit test, so we're working right here. Lewis is exercising and his muscles need oxygen. Which best describes, hold on, I better do one thing here just to make sure I'm loud enough there. So if you had to turn it up, you may need to turn it back down now. Exercising and his muscles need oxygen, which best describes how systems interact to bring body into homeostasis. The word homeostasis, I'm hopefully you're familiar with that. But that's just the processes that our cells, that our body goes through to keep things as normal. Probably the best example, real world example, is your thermostat in your house. You can set your temperature, and it's designed to, if it gets too cold, the heat can come on and increase the temperature, and if it's too warm, you can cool it down. The idea of around here, that number is 76. We try to keep things cool enough to be 76 and warm enough, not warm enough to be 76, that'd be too much, but 72-ish. So it's the idea of kind of keeping things as normal as possible. And your body does this all over the place with your pH levels, your heart rate, temperature, all kinds of things. So if our muscles need oxygen, that should tell us that the answer we're looking for discusses muscles getting oxygen. Okay, so that should be a kind of a clue to what's going on. So if we look at the choices, the choice that you chose refers to the skeletal system. So right away, probably your first clue is that it's not talking about muscles, or the muscular system. But the other side of that is, if you think about, do bones, do skeletal bones, is oxygen delivered to bones? Maybe to some degree, a little bit, but certainly not a high need. Calcium, other resources, blood, that kind of stuff. So it's not that it doesn't need any, but when you're exercising, it's not your bones that run out of oxygen and can no longer produce ATP with just lost my word there. Yeah, with cellular respiration, aerobic respiration, that's right. It would be the muscles. So that's why this answer up here is the one answer. It wouldn't be circulatory system, okay, and it wouldn't be skeletal system. So right away that throws out A, C, and D, and so B was the one to take a look at. Right, let's close that, bring this one up here front and center. Which shows a correct association between a structure and one of its functions. If you think about, so essentially you're going to have a noun and a function, and they're asking you, okay, which one is the correct association? we start with the one that you chose, pores, you can almost correlate pores and sweat glands. That's where sweat glands are in your pores, and being a teenager and with skin situations, I shouldn't say being a teenager. Most teenagers, a lot of teenagers, suffer from various skin conditions because of dirt and pores and debris. It's just part of the age, unfortunately. But the idea of pores and sweat glands kind of being, sweat glands are in pores, and it's the idea of pores receiving sensory information. It wouldn't be the pores, okay? The pores are just kind of like the open spaces. I know if you look at your skin, you don't think of open spaces, but essentially it is, and that's where. And then the sweat glands, sweat glands would receive sensory information, heat, and of course that information would be sent along with the receptors and get a message that, okay, we need to start sweating, we need to start putting out some of the liquids. But one of the benefits of sweating is that it does in fact remove waste. That waste is kind of brought in through the skin tissue. That can be dropped off from the blood flow. I mean, it could just be an accumulation of debris on your skin that as you do sweat, that water comes rolling out of those glands. It collects that waste and carries it off, and you wipe it off, or it drips off your arm or whatever. So that's the idea. That's the one it was looking for right there. Okay. Now moving on to the questions associated with your final exam. And most of these I were able to bring in a picture to kind of compare, to help with what the topic is. This one is showing you an image of a bacteria, and it's essentially asking you which one is this, which of the three types. So right away, and I'm sure you understand, is that nucleoid we can throw away. That's the DNA compartment for a prokaryotic cell, and compartment's kind of a generous word. But anyway, not part of this question. So our three types. So you can see that from over here, bacillus are rod-shaped, and rod-shape insinuates that it's a lot longer than it is wide. If you think about anything that's rod-shaped, like a 2x4, a 12-foot 2x4, or a rebar, if you know what rebar is. But any pole, telephone pole, that's rod-shaped. It's a lot longer than it is wide. So for the bacteria to be bacillus-shaped, it would be almost like that, a lot longer than it is wide. So Spirillum, as you can see over here, it gets that name because it's spiral shaped. It's hard to tell from this image, or even if you're looking at it in a microscope, but it is like a spiral staircase, almost similar to what DNA is as well. It's that spiral shape. When you're looking at it through a microscope, or in this picture, in this image here, it's two-dimensional, and you can't get that three-dimensional feel, but in essence, that's where it gets its name. Coccus, as you can see, spear. You'll also see the word circle. As you can see, these aren't perfect circles, but they are kind of spear-shaped, roundish in nature, and so that's the reason why coccus is the one that it was after. Didn't mean to do that. Alright, so this next question. What is the next step in the process after a substrate enters an active site of an enzyme? Hopefully you're familiar enough with enzymes. Enzymes are great to talk about. I love talking about enzymes. They're such fantastic molecules, and the things that they get done for us is amazing. But anyway, brought this image in here for you. Now, the idea of an enzyme, it's the basically it helps with reactions. It helps to speed up reactions by lowering the activation energy, which is going to come up in another question. But the way this works is that the substrate, whatever it is, maybe it's lactose, the enzyme that works on lactose, or maybe it's an enzyme that works on breaking down glucose during cellular respiration, whatever it may be. But once the substrate enters this area, and this area is called the active site, which is this word right here, the next step, as you can see, was that the enzyme and substrate binds. The substrate basically binds to it in this compartment that is very specific for a molecule. It's going to be shaped exactly like that molecule, and there's other things that go on that can change that shape to not allow the reaction to happen. But anyway, as you can see here, once that enzyme binds to the substrate, or once the substrate binds to the enzyme, then it's called the enzyme substrate complex, which is right here that it wants. It's got that word right here, is almost right here as well, but it's got the word product, and we're talking substrates and enzymes, so we were looking for something that resembled that, and that's the enzyme substrate complex. Alright, for our next one, we've got an image here in the microscope, and you correctly determined that these were all cells. Okay, these are all would be animal cells at that. They're more roundish in nature instead of the square of a plant cell. But so hopefully you were thinking that all these were cells, and then possibly where you were thinking from then is that, okay, it wants the word cell, but what we were forgetting or not thinking about was there's a bunch of cells here. Okay, and we know that tissue is a collection, and just for space I'm just going to go right there, a collection of cells. So that's why tissue was the one that wanted. If it would have been layers of tissue, then it would have been organ, or if there's a bunch of organs, organ system, but a bunch of cells equals tissue. Alright, well, didn't do that. Okay, here's that activation energy question that I mentioned earlier. And I brought in a picture. This is a picture that I use when we're talking endergonic or exergonic reactions as a part of the energy process, cellular respiration, photosynthesis, that kind of stuff. And what this graph is showing you is for this reaction to occur, it needs this much. It needs this much energy for that to occur. And so what an enzyme does, enzymes come in and lower the activation energy to where it can happen faster. So with the enzyme being involved, now I just need this much energy, and then the reaction can happen faster. And so if I lower the activation energy, then I'm not going to decrease the rate, I'm going to increase the rate. So a lower activation energy is going to increase or make the reaction happen faster. Now these two, just like a lower activation energy, if these two scenarios are in play, if we increase the pressure or we increase the amount of enzymes, then that's going to allow the reaction again to happen in a faster rate. The enzymes would be, because there's more enzymes, we can get more work done, and the pressure would be that now we're going to really condense the volume, which allows everything to happen quicker. And then temperature here, the reason why this is going to decrease the rate of reaction, temperature, distance, those kind of things tend to basically, if you increase, then you increase. If you decrease, you decrease. So if I lower the temperature, that's going to make the cell conditions colder, and as we know, most things, even the electrons and protons and whatever, the molecular level, everything slows down because there's not as much energy involved in a lower temperature. So low temperature would decrease the rate. It would decrease it simply because it would make the enzyme work slower, or whatever the process was. It would just slow down because the temperature that the cell was in. Alright, and one more here. Just try to get the whole thing on here. There we go. Alright, and again, I brought in a little picture. This particular question, it talks about layers, tissue layers. So two main plant tissues. So right away, which two? So right away our answer should be thinking that our answer is going to include two plant tissues. And if we bring this over, there we go. The idea of just looking at all these words, I don't know how familiar you are with plant tissue, but all these words are plant tissues except the one, stems. Stems are simply the name for the stalk between the roots and the leaves of a plant. So not tissue oriented, just name oriented, if that makes sense. The rest of these, the vascular tissue is this middle portion here, and that's like the blood, the veins of a plant. The xylem, brings water up from the ground. The phloem is what moves the sugars down from the leaves and the green areas throughout the rest of the plant. So if we're looking to release sugars, that's certainly going to be the phloem part, the vascular tissue. And then the word ground. Ground tissue is all this stuff in between the epidermis, the outside layer, and the inner layer, that vascular tissue. The ground is all this other stuff. So when you look at a cross section of like a tree's been cut down, you can count the rings to see how old the tree is. That's the ground tissue that you're working with. That outer edge bark, then there's a small circle in the middle that you can clearly see. That's the vascular. Everything else. So sometimes the ground tissue is almost 90% of a plant. And that ground tissue, that's where all the metabolic stuff happens and all those processes. And that would be a part of the carrying hormones. So from process of elimination, if you knew, I don't know how familiar you are with the plant structures, but you could throw out one. Leaves would be a part of the sugars, but again, not plant tissue. And I said all but one. I didn't think about leaves. Leaves are not plant tissue either. So if you just throw out things that aren't plant tissue, now you're down to two answers. And dermal, that's to be like on a tree, that'd be the bark, that stuff. That wouldn't help any. If you're thinking green plant like a blade of grass or something, that'd be more like the cuticle and that outer edge. So that wouldn't be helping you with the hormones. So really you're just left with D here, and that may just simply been vocabulary for plants and a missing or information gap over the plant terms. So that's your seven questions that you wanted to look at. If you need more help, additional help, I need to speak more on a particular topic, let me know. If you want to do something with the quiz or test, test or exam, let me know. But again, remember our time is short. Whatever we do has to be done today, so shoot me a message, and if you need something done, we'll take care of it. And until then, we'll see you next time.